how often do you guys get cold leads? How many do you get a month? How many of those, turn to estimates? How many of those turn to deals? And then based on that, we could prescribe as the doctor, oh, it sounds like you have the flu.
Hi, and welcome to the 91 Day Success Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan, and today I'm thrilled to have with me Chaitin Maycott. Chaitin, tell us a little bit about yourself and your agency. Would love to learn a little bit more, and in particular, although you and I know each other through the Seven Figure Agency and Josh Nelson's coaching group, tell us a little bit about your agency and let our audience know a little bit about yourself and who you guys serve.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks for letting me on, Jonathan. This is pretty exciting. The agency that we run is called Demolition Marketing Leads. It is by far the corniest name out there.
I
However,
love it though.
it gets right to the point. We're very big into lead generation, specifically for demolition companies, particularly the ones that are tearing down buildings, whether they're residential or commercial. We don't really service the interior demolition where they're tearing down walls and beams inside of a building, but we're really into, frankly, the fun stuff is knocking down houses, knocking down apartment complexes that, let's say, caught on fire or are no longer in use. The old Kmart and Costco buildings and things like that, getting those knocked down. And sometimes, even more exciting stuff, this actually just came up yesterday, is tearing down nuclear power facilities, aka
Ooh,
the big power plants, and
yeah.
that's obviously massive deals and big multi-million dollar jobs for our clients. Things like skyscrapers and arenas and all that fun stuff. And we feel that getting their phone to ring and their email to be flooded with opportunities, so that way they could cherry pick them, is very overlooked by a somewhat antiquated industry in demolition.
Very interesting. It's a niche or niche. I don't know how to say that anymore the right way, but
No one
it's
does.
it's
We all act as
it's
if
a
we
niche
do.
I've never really thought about. But you're right. I mean, what a service that probably, like you said, it's probably to a certain extent a combination of good old boys club and then the new technologically infused. People that are doing things a new way. My experience with that really is watching YouTube videos that went wrong on demolition, where things fell on the
Mm.
wrong thing. So very exciting industry. Tell me a little bit. How did you get into that niche? I know, if I'm not mistaken, you guys started with a generalist agency and then niched down. Am I correct on that? But how did you guys get
Yeah.
into that? How did you decide that that was a good niche to get into, Caton?
Getting fired by enough normal clients. No.
There you go. That's a great way, right?
Just being a generalist, frankly, it doesn't pay the bills. And we kind of noticed that with our own demolition clients. If you imagine demolition has things like homes, but it also has breaking down and filling pools. It has things like skyscrapers, which is very specialized, of course. There's so many different angles. And what we find is in our clients, them being specialists is really keen. So for ourselves, it's being keen. We dealt with accountants, lawyers, restaurants, you name it, in the generalist agency that I started in 2017. In roughly 2019 or so, we had a really cool opportunity, like a joint venture with a partner who was very good at SEO. And he essentially said, hey, I'm over in Greece. I'm going to be moving to Texas, but that still doesn't help me. I have a really awesome lead gen site that is based in Atlanta, and I lived in Atlanta. This guy and I had just been purely talking about search engine optimization and working together on some projects. And he said, hey, if you can go shake some hands and put a face behind the name, we can divvy up and split this kind of gray hat lead gen site that was for Atlanta Demolition and go close the deal, go shake some hands, and we'll split the profit. So we made that happen. We saw just with that one gray hat site, meaning it wasn't a traditional business.
Right.
It was
Yep.
a lead gen site, like a lead magnet type of thing that
Hmm.
is still out there, still generating a lot of leads. It is ugly as could be, but it is fantastic for SEO and it's fantastic for getting people to opt in. So they'll either fill out a form or they'll call. Then we redirect that to a client of ours who actually is a very, very legitimate demolition company in Atlanta and throughout Georgia. And frankly, what I saw that was so funny with that, Jonathan, is that we never got fired. I was partially joking about getting fired before and partially not. Being a generalist it stinks. Like once you get the payroll or the bankroll, perhaps, that you can go venture out into being a specialist. I don't care if you're in
Mhm.
demolition. I don't care if you're in marketing. I don't care if you're a restaurant. It's hard to be a diner and make the money that steakhouse does. You might need to start as the diner of sorts and then evolve into the steakhouse. But I would find it very hard to believe that the waiting list at a diner is much longer than the best steakhouse in town. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we just saw how there was so much volume and so much money that we were bringing to our clients just with a gray hat site that was purely on SEO, no ads, no retargeting. The reviews on GMB were like 3 reviews. It wasn't 30 or 300. And after enough banging my head against the wall and doing great work for other clients, I kind of realized and said, hey, I'm sitting on a gold mine here with this thing of demolition that is not highly competitive from a marketing perspective. I know that for frankly a few $1,000s a month, our clients would be making millions of dollars every single month or year.
Mhm.
And yeah, I explored that. I started in 2019, really, really did a deep dive over the last few quarters or so, inspired by Seven Figure Agency, inspired by Josh Nelson, and it has been pretty rewarding.
Well, that's fantastic, and what a great story. I love how that happened and how that's come to be, and that's amazing. Um, Tell me a little bit about the marketing tactics that you're using. You've talked a little bit about how you got into it with that gray hat site, so to speak. Which nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's a perfectly legitimate way to build leads, and especially if it's continuing to work. I love those stories, by the way, that come up sometimes about these sites that are out there that just they seem to rank well and convert well, even though we look at them as pros and go, "Wow, that is the ugliest site." But when they convert, they convert. So I think that's a great tool. What are other things that you've done to help people in the demolition industry make sure that they become that go-to expert? I mean, you mentioned that nuclear job. That's got to be a mammoth opportunity. How do you
Right.
position your clients to be ready for things like that?
Yeah, so I would say first it's by kind of selecting the right clients. So in marketing, when we were a generalist, it was like, hey, do you have $1,000 or more a month to spend on a retainer? Do you have a business that can pick up a phone or respond to an email? And maybe you have some sort of ticket price that is on the middle to higher end. So that way, if we bring you 10 calls a month, which would be pretty abysmal, frankly. But if we did, let's say, and those
Hmm.
10 calls happen to be opportunities, if you guys close two, are you going to be happy with me or upset with me? We found in demolition, typically we're getting at least 100 opportunities every month for our clients.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Out of those 100, we asked them prior to working together, what is your normal close rate on something that's not a referral? Because there's a big
Hmm.
distinction between the referrals versus a cold lead.
Sure. Sure.
And they'll tell us, 5%, 10%, 20%, 30%, that kind of thing. And we'll typically do some sort of calculations, like, show them that we're nerds, get the calculator out, say, let's say hypothetically, 6 months from now, we're bringing you roughly 100 opportunities every single month. If you already told us on a cold lead, you could close at 20%. That sounds like 20 opportunities, 20 deals or estimates, so to speak, that you guys could produce and close. If your average ticket on a demolition, it can range typically from, I'd say $15,000 is the least, usually for a small
Hmm.
home tear down, because again, we
Makes
are doing
sense.
full tear downs. But the ticket can go to millions, multi-million. We had a client recently, craziest story. People were doing fireworks in the courtyard of the apartment. This happened in Atlanta and burned down a large chunk of a multi-hundred unit apartment complex that all the residents
Mm.
are now out of. They can't live there. It's uninhabitable. And our client messaged me and said, "Hey, just want to thank you. Here's a news article." And I was like, "What? What? Why are you sending this to me?" He goes, "We're the first ones called. The property management group is kind of in dire straits. They're out of, multiple hundred tenants for this one location. The city obviously has the area kind of quarantined with fencing, and they're worried about
Sure.
people, stealing from the occupancy and stuff like that." So big deal, right? That one I want to say the quote was like 750,000
Mm.
roughly, and our client was the one who got the first call. So that
Wow.
is a nice opportunity. That is an opportunity that they're probably one of a few contenders. But again, them
Hmm.
being first to market, so to speak, has a lot of value in it. So anyway, yeah, I would say that our clients need to have good reviews where possible. Frankly, a lot of demolition companies, they don't have a website in certain cases. They have very few reviews. They might have a Facebook page, but not a Google My Business, or their Google My Business is not populated very well. So all this to
Hmm.
say, things like search engine optimization are massive. We learned that with the Gray Hat site. Things like
Yep.
advertising, kind of cold advertising, primarily on Google, followed up by retargeting that can go on Instagram, Facebook, programmatically through banner ads. What we tell our clients with that is it's almost like a roofer. If you knock a door once and say, hey, your shingles are falling off, that's great. Congrats that you did one time. That's a cold ad. What's better is a roofer going 7 times or 10 times and saying, hey, we're doing the neighbor next door. Just want to stop by
Mm.
and see again if you let me go up on the roof. That is the kind of genius of retargeting ads, not just doing cold, making sure the pixels are on the website appropriately so
Yep.
that way you can execute. Um, so we've kind of covered having reviews, having a Google My Business, making sure you have as many reviews as possible, doing SEO very actively, having ads, having retargeting ads. We do a reignition for our clients where this kind of blows their mind, and it also buys us time while SEO and advertising is kind of coagulating.
Hmm.
We ask them for an email list. So that can be very challenging in certain cases where they're like, email
I
list, I
bet.
don't know. But they have invoices, they have emails, they have methods that we can kind of, in certain cases, drag them through to help them realize, oh my gosh, like we've been in business for 20 years. Of course, we have 2,000 emails or something.
Hmm.
From that, we'll be able to request potential repeat business, referrals, reviews. If people are open to that, we can kind of like, not necessarily expect it, but we could just point to the fact that there's a way for them to say kind words about the business.
Yep.
Those are like a quick overview of kind of the services, and we really provide that all under a few boxes that we work with our clients on the basis. We don't go necessarily into the jargon with most of our clients because all we care about and all they care about at the end of the day is how many times a month can you get the phone ringing and how
Sure.
many emails can you get into our inbox. And most of them, frankly, just like if they were to tell me about their excavator specs or their wrecking ball specs, uh,
Hmm.
I'm interested and curious. I truly am. It is a fascinating business, but it's not entirely my business because I don't
Right.
own a demolition company.
Exactly.
So for them, they say, "Hey, man, we need our revenue to increase. Frankly, how do we do that? Well, you need more estimates to happen. Well, how do we get more estimates? We have to have people know that you're on the radar and on the map. And believe it or not, in most cities, you can get a lot of volume every single month, and we can help you, frankly, very easily." Get to the top of that heap, even if you're not the demo company who's been around for 30 years.
I love it. Well, and again, that makes so much sense as you describe that and put that together that that would work well. I mean, it sounds like you're helping them do what I would refer to as the blocking and tackling, and I think that's so important because so many marketing agencies focus on the bleeding edge and all the cutting edge stuff, and they miss sometimes that important blocking and tackling that wins the game and helps their clients get a bunch of leads. And when you're talking the numbers you are, I mean, those are amazing numbers of inquiries, at least from my perspective, for what seems like a very niche service in a city like that. So kudos to you for doing that and for having such an amazing system there pertaining to that. Do
Yeah,
you
it's
guys
fun.
do you guys also still run the legacy agency, or are you solely focused
We
now
do.
in the niche?
Yeah, I would
Okay.
explain it as the generalist or legacy business is when the opportunity comes about and we don't have to
Mhm.
stretch our hands too far. We're not necessarily interested in putting that business out into the public like we used to. It's really, frankly, a cash flow type of thing and kind of the
Sure.
cash cow. But all that to say, a client that we used to take on with that company relative to a client that we take on with this company, it's night and day. I never talked to a company as big as just the other day alone. I talked to a demolition company and he told me everything flat out, nice and easy, right in the beginning of the conversation. Never met this person in my life. We were doing a call and an audit for their online presence, and he was like, "Yeah, so we have 80 employees, do about $34 million a year. At least that was last year in 2023." And like, just the size of these opportunities relative to the general agency, where
Right.
you're talking to a lawyer, and in certain cases, they're like, "Yeah, I don't really feel comfortable sharing revenue," and it's like, well, you reached out to us and you
Exactly.
need help, and we're just trying to ask some basic questions because I'm a calculator. I want to make sure that the calculations make sense for your particular business
Exactly.
because there's lawyers of all types. I don't know what your average case size is. I don't know how many cases you get every month. I don't know how many cases you want to get every month. So there's these questions we need to kind of ask, and I think some people think we work for the IRS, and they'll hold their hands up. We don't find that much in the specialist agency because the numbers are so much bigger. Um, they get it. They understand. Hey, if
Right.
I spend $5,000 a month and it makes me, $500,000 a month in the first 2-3 months, and then we
Yeah. How many
scale
times
that
can I do that
together.
again?
Right, and their profit margins, you ask them their calculators as well, so we speak very nicely. They go, "Yeah, average profit margin is 15%." They're not, "Oh, I don't know, maybe, sometimes it's 10." So
Sure.
they're like, "This is what the number is. So Chaitin, if you're telling me we can do this, and we know we can close at this rate, and we're anywhere near that rate of closing, you're a money machine for us, and we'll 5, 10, 20, 30x what we spend with you guys every month in revenue, and our profits will still be way more every single month than what we invest with you guys."
I love it. I love how you've identified that value in working with them when they understand their numbers, because marketing really is a numbers game. You've got to understand obviously what that value is of a new client, what that lifetime value is, how much it's going to cost you to bring them on board, and how long is it going to take to do that. And that opens up your avenues of what type of marketing you can be doing and what's going to be most effective. So I love that analogy. I think that's so true. We often find that, when we get started in the agency world, I've been doing this now for 13 years now. You've been doing it for a while, that, we start working with anybody that's willing to pay us. And we find out sometimes those smaller clients, while they have sometimes even greater needs, they're more difficult
Mm,
to work with because they don't understand some of the basics, like you said. I mean, if you don't know your profit margin, it's really hard for me to tell you, can I add enough value to make the investment worthwhile? But if you know what your profit margin is and you know what your average sale is and your close ratio and those basic numbers, then yeah, then we can really quickly figure out if it's a good deal, not a good deal, if it's going to pay off or not pay off. Oh, I love
right,
that.
and we can be, like, consultative and say, "Hey, looks like based on your input, your raw input, based on our raw input," because 'cause we'll really ask the questions and lead the horse to water. We're not gonna, necessarily bring the water right to them and sell
Sure.
them. We're going to say, "Hey, how often do you guys get cold leads? How many do you get a month? How many of those, turn to estimates? How many of those turn to deals?" And then based on that, we could prescribe as the doctor, "Oh, it sounds like you have the flu, not that you're just suffering, a headache in the current moment while you're
Exactly.
coming to us during your physical." Like, the headache doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a prolonged issue. Let's find out, and then we could prescribe if medicine needs to be prescribed. And we're happy at this point to walk away when they come to us for that kind of consultative check-in. We're happy to walk away and say, "Hey, it sounds like everything's great. It sounds like your calculations make sense," or they don't. If they don't, maybe this person could help you, or this life cycle of your business needs to be kind of tinkered, and then maybe we could help you. But yeah, it is beautiful relative to, as a general agency, just trying to get the next client, trying to keep the clients you
Absolutely.
have.
Oh, no doubt. Well, and churn's always an issue when you're an agency and all that. Let's take a little pivot and let's take a look towards the future. What do you see for business owners. Our audience is a lot of different business owners, maybe some in the demolition industry. I don't know. I know we've got some in various service industries, but what do you see happening in the future, maybe for 2024 as we're recording this and probably be released? It's going to be January, February of 2024. What do you see happening this year of things that business owners should be paying attention to that maybe aren't on their radar when it comes to marketing and business development?
Yeah, maybe I'll give a twofold answer. So I
That'd
would
be great.
say almost like the amateur or smaller or medium-sized businesses, frankly, I would look internal before you look external. Um, that's something that as a generalist, in the past life, so to speak, you're
Hmm.
always looking external. Is it cold email? Is it ads? Is it SEO? Is it this, that, the other? Which of course we sell as well.
Sure.
So what I'm trying to say is our best clients are the ones who's already kind of done their self-guidance, their self-seeking, their own identification, like that example of the other day. If you have a business that's doing $34 million a year and you have 80 people that you're accountable to put food on the table for them, not that you're a $340 million a year business, but I think you've kind of crossed the threshold where you've done enough internal examination. For the smaller and medium sized businesses, I think they can get kind of lost in the sauce with the latest and greatest to an
Sure.
extent.
That makes sense.
Um,
Yeah.
this may be a different answer than maybe most people would say, and be more self promotional. For me, I would really say kind of look internally like, hey, do you want to be happy as a person? I promise you it's not the new car.
Hmm.
I promise you there's something more, just like in your business, to kind of self examine if you're small or medium. If you are medium or larger, and for every kind of angle or niche, this is very different. I think if you're somewhat of a seasoned business person, you'll know for what you do where you self categorize based on your industry. For medium and larger, I would say definitely leaning into digital is a no brainer. I don't care if that's dashboarding on your current state business. I don't care if that's implementing tablets for every employee you have, or upgrading your computers, Best Buy from whenever 1992.
Yep. Yep.
um,
Yep.
some of these places are still operating on stuff that it's just fascinating to me. And that's a big company in the example of Best Buy, but there's plenty of other companies that you see their computers and you go, that can't be real. Like
Yeah.
that's an antique. That should be in a museum somewhere. And meanwhile, this young salesperson is still magically inputting into this system to write up a sales order. So, yeah, I would say look internal for small and medium sized. Do find a mentor. So, I'm not saying entirely everything is internalized. That can be a very lonely loop of a place.
Sure.
Um, but look inside, find one particular mentor if possible that has actually been there, done it in your space. Tony Robbins is fantastic, love the guy. Is he going to help my marketing company as much as someone like a Josh Nelson would? Tony probably won't. He'll probably help
Really
me,
good
which will help
advice.
my company.
Right.
But when you have someone who's been there, done that, and ideally are still actively doing that, where they can point, not just like a guru who says I've made money doing, let's say, real estate investing, and you go, okay, how many units do you have? And they can't give
Hmm.
you an answer, or they used to have 100 units or something. For me, what's more viable is find the most legitimate one, be okay with spending some money to rank up your small or new or medium sized business to something more valuable, to something bigger.
Yep.
But don't go with all these million other people and always look for the latest and greatest. Hone in internally, look for one legit active mentor in the space, spend a few $1,000s a year. It doesn't have to be $100+ thousand a year, but
Right.
spend a few $1,000s a year, be around those people. The peers that are around that leader or mentor will probably be very valuable. And then for the medium to large size businesses, just it's okay to embrace technology. If you don't, you may not be feeling the pain now, but you will be feeling the pain shortly, in
Hmm.
the next few quarters. And then stick to really focusing on what you do best. Similar to Amazon, once you get really good at selling the books, then allow yourself to sell the beauty products. But don't, like us generalists from lifetimes ago, don't try, in my opinion, to sell the books and the beauty supplies and the food, all
Mm,
those things at once. Earn the ability when you're a thought out enough company to be able to go from we're going to dominate books, and then we're going to very wisely go into the next market, and then we're going
mhm.
to aim to dominate that while being able to keep the dominance of books, and then grow out wide, but grow deep before you go for that width.
Really good advice. It reminds me of one of my mentors who often says, when you get started in the marketing business, when you get started in the marketing business, pick your niche and stick with it until you make $1 million in that niche. Then you can
Mm,
talk about another niche. But don't even think, because especially as entrepreneurs, and we've got a lot of them in our audience, we often suffer from bright shiny object syndrome or squirrel, and we see things and we get ideas and we want to do that. And so often I think if we would focus on what we're doing and double down on our efforts on that instead of trying to do 14 things, we would find that we would achieve that elusive goal that we're searching for and that success that we're looking for. So really sound advice there, Chaitin. Yeah, that's amazing. I really love that. So fantastic. Um, One of the things we love to do, and there's no particular time during the podcast we ask, but our name of our podcast is the 91 Day Success Podcast. And I did not prep you for this. I'm going to dump this one on you, but we always love to ask if you had or were advising someone who had $1,000 and was going to start a new business. And their objective was to generate $10,000 in revenue in the first 91 days or 3 months. What would you do or what would you recommend somebody do? We ask everybody that. I love to get opinions
mm,
from successful entrepreneurs. As you think about that, and then again, I know I'm dumping it on you here, but what would you do in that situation? You didn't have to worry about housing, you don't have to worry about food, but you've got a thousand
okay.
dollars to put into your business, and you've got 90 days, 91 days to do that. What would you focus on?
Yeah, I think I have an interesting one on that. So, um, I guess it's multifold. If you have a good credit score, you're going to be able to skip some steps. If you don't have a
Yep.
good credit score, frankly, in a weird way, you could invest a portion of that thousand or maybe all of it and get your credit score as good as could be. And then from there, it unlocks a lot of doors from a personal as well as business credit perspective.
Hmm.
By the way, I don't, I'm not someone who sells credit reporting or clearing
No,
your
that's
credit
okay.
report or something like that, because so many people do that and they don't, frankly, impress me at all. But be able to get your credit in a good spot because there are 0% interest credit cards. I myself have access to hundreds of thousands of dollars of credit at 0%. It's typically for a promotional period of something like 12 months to 18 months. So, in my opinion, that unlocks a whole plethora of doors that you
Sure.
have to be careful with, right? $1,000 in today's day and age. You're lucky if you could stay at an Airbnb for one night, 5 nights,
Yeah,
3 nights, what have you, depending on
no
the
doubt.
class of Airbnb in the market. I think by doing that credit thing, it's kind of a secret because it unlocks so much more capital potential. That again, if I were to give you the normal answer and just tell you the mechanism to make the money,
Yep.
you're pretty pigeonholed, in my opinion. Not totally, incapable, but now you just, let's say in 3 months or 6 months, there is a time frame to utilizing the credit to get you something like 0% interest loans or credit cards for a term. Those are not 0% indefinitely. I'm not saying you can go to Amex and tomorrow they'll give you 100,000,
Right.
but
No,
get your,
understood.
yeah, yeah. I mean, even the 0% before I ever used it, I used to go, oh, great. Like, they're not going to charge me anything for the 18 months. It's like, no, you still have the minimum payment, which is roughly 1, sometimes 2% of the balance on that account. And the interest, specifically the interest, is the thing that is not accruing for that period of time. Once that
Gotcha.
promotion ends, is when the interest will accrue. So it unlocks a lot of doors and potentials. Now you have more breathing room and capitalization for potential to earn money. And then from there, I mean, something like a marketing company can have legs. The reason I say that is it's not very capital intensive. Frankly, you could
Mhm.
build a landing page, you could jump on TikTok, um, you can jump on YouTube, etc. Those more or less are free. There are some softwares that can help you with things like captions and being able to do snippets that will be able to get your social media moving quicker. Um, yeah, I'd be curious. I don't know if you're going to give us answers in this session, but I would say something like that. Get the credit right, be able to have capitalization, go into something like marketing where you can talk about a few $1,000s a month with clients rather than, a vending machine that's going to, you're not
Good
going to impress
advice.
me. You're not going to impress me after a year with one vending machine. Like it's really go get a day job. Um, with a marketing company, however, you can really capitalize, collect your money up front before services are rendered. It's okay to have a white label help you with those services. I wouldn't say, you need to do the services yourself and learn SEO like the back of your hand or learn paid ads like the back of your hand. Just be in a niche, be very focused, use that credit or capitalization there to help you only in the instances when you're getting clients come on, you can start to add more into paid ads for yourself, SEO for yourself, going to conferences, investing in mentorship, that kind of thing. Yeah, maybe it's an interesting answer because I don't know too many other things that are as accessible and legitimate for potential
Hmm.
than marketing companies. I don't do you have maybe an amalgamation of what normal answers are? That's kind of my best one off the
They're
top.
they're all over the board. So we're in our 54th or 5th episode here that we're recording, and they've literally been all over the board. And ironically, none of them have been the same. They've all been a bit
Mm,
different. I think one of the trends that's carried through, and you mentioned it yourself, is you need to focus on if regardless of what you're doing, doesn't matter if you're a chiropractor or you're a marketing agency, you need to focus on people that are willing to pay you money in order to solve a problem. And an example that I used from my past when I founded Valor Circle 13 plus years ago, that's the agency I stepped away from. One of my first clients was an embroidery shop. Of course, when you're starting up, sometimes it's like, hey, you're willing to pay me to do marketing. That's great.
right.
They remained a client and still are a client of Valor Circle, but they're not a great client. Not because they're bad people; they're great people. But their average sale is about $10 because you want to
Mm,
put your logo on a shirt. Maybe it's $20. I don't know what it is nowadays. I haven't done it in a long time, but let's say it's $25. As you know, it takes a lot of $25 sales in order to pay for good marketing, as
mm,
opposed to look at your side on the demolition, doing exactly, I think, what you're recommending. Find a business where the value of that new client is significant enough that I don't need to bring you 100 new sales this month. I could just bring you a dozen new opportunities. And if you got one or two of those, you'd go, wow, this is a great return on my investment. And so I think if there's a underlying consistency, it's identify a market that you can serve where people are willing to pay you a reasonable amount of money for the services that you're rendering, and that new client value to the business has enough value to scale. Because again, I could focus on embroidery shops, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you're in the embroidery shop business, or if you're the client, and if you're listening, I'm talking about you. There's nothing wrong with that business. But if I'm trying to serve that business as a marketing agency or as a vendor in any way, shape, or form, I have to do a lot of product or a lot of something for them to make it worthwhile.
mm,
And as opposed to, again, your demolitions that you niche in, if you bring that average client one new deal a month, they're not worried about paying you next month, because that's more than covered the expense of what they've put in and everything else. And so I think, I love your idea of the credit and all that. I'm not taking anything away, but as far as an underlying thread or whatever, I think it's that find somebody that new client value is significant enough that they can afford to pay you. One of my mentors often says, if you want to make money, just find a problem that people are willing to pay you to fix. If you want to make great money, find a big problem that rich people are willing to pay you to fix. And rich people generally translates into businesses. Not always, but
mm,
you know, you and I both know that as a business, to spend $1,000 to achieve an objective is not a big deal. As it might be a huge deal for you, even as a successful executive in a residential setting to do. You might be going, I'm not going to spend $1,000 on that. But as a business, we look at it through a different filter. We're looking at it through a different lens, and that means that we're generally willing to pay more money to get things done for us that are causing problems. So, yeah, great
Right.
answer overall. I really appreciate that. That's fantastic.
And
Well,
on that
if
real quick, before the
yeah,
next one, like you're saying, it's always fascinated me. A business, let's say they have a warehouse, right? You look at a warehouse, and let's just say it's one particular business. It's not
yep,
subdivided into multiple businesses. You look at it and you go, that's a big building. It's a warehouse, whatever. But if
yep,
that were someone's home with the same square footage, your mind is blown.
right,
So what does that say? Like you're saying, the businesses typically are where the money is and they're willing to spend it. As if you're
correct,
to flip that for the house example, when you see it as a person's home, it's just so unusual, rare, weird, because you look at it and say, man, one, two, maybe it's a family's home. A few incomes could pay for that thing. But when it's a business's square footage, you go, all right, that's normal. That makes sense. So yeah,
yeah,
the businesses definitely typically have the money. If you're going to consumers, you have to do either high ticket to wealthy people, or you do a certain ticket that's just mass market and you have to sell a lot of units at a reasonable margin. For me, just like our clients, in certain cases, if we get them one job a year, which would be abysmal for us,
sure.
but in certain cases, they're like, hey, we made a few $1 million off that one job.
It was worth it.
Everything else you gave us was just like that was the icing on the cake.
No, and I think your point you're making there is really good too. It's got to be worth your time. It's one thing to sell a course for $49 and hope to sell it to 1,000 people because you can create it once and you can then sell it many times. But when you're providing services like we're talking about, that's not something that is as replicatable. While you can provide the same service, you still need to put the work in every month in order to do it. You can't,
Mm,
you can't set your ads for your clients and have them run for a year and never touch them. It doesn't work that way. And so it requires more work, therefore requires more investment on any part. So no, really, really good information. So Chaitin, if people are listening today, obviously you've shared some really great knowledge and things like that. They want to reach out, connect with you. What's the best way for them to reach out and connect with you, Chaitin?
yeah, you can go over to our website. It's demolitionmarketingleads.com. Again, cheesy as could be, but it hits right to the point of
It
what we're
does.
looking to do for our clients. It's also great for SEO. And then also, we have a podcast, which we are always open to people coming on. And it's particularly vendors, contractors, owners, etc., in the demolition space.
Hmm.
We noticed that there's a really, really big void in that ecosystem of pretty much being, a Reddit thread or group, a Facebook group, the association, and really there's not a lot of other mechanisms for these successful people to come together. And we really welcome that. We want to build a community there truly that is beyond our business. So if you are any of those things, vendors, owners, contractors, to do with the demolition space, we welcome you on. And that's called Demolition Success Secrets. It's kind of taken off like wildfire in the space. We literally started it a few weeks ago,
Awesome.
and it's gotten a lot of eyes and ears of, again, kind of the right people. Because if you're a general consumer, you're going to look at the name and say Demolition Success Secrets next. I have no interest in it. But if you're in the industry, our guests have been incredible, and our audience has received it pretty well.
Well, that's fantastic, and they're good. We'll put those links up as well so that you can click on
Okay.
them. But it's always helpful for our people listening on Apple Podcasts or whatever. Maybe they're walking the dog, out driving. It's nice to have those in there so they can do that. Well, again, I want to thank you for your time, Chaitin. You've been a great guest. You've dropped some amazing knowledge with us today, and kudos for it's just an amazing niche and a great story to talk about. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for investing the time to sit here and share with us today on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
Absolutely. And thank you for listening in today. We so appreciate you. We want to remind you if you've enjoyed the podcast, please give us a 5-star review. That means a lot to us. And don't forget to subscribe as well. With that, make it a great day, and we'll see you guys on the other side.